All right, a good Sunday evening to you. I'm meteorologist Brian McClure. August 27th. So here we are looking at Tropical Storm Idalia. It's been a weird storm, and a lot of times these little tropical lows that drift across Central America, they do tend to be oddballs. This is something I brought up actually last week. I said, hey, when these things cross back and forth between Central America, they can kind of do some weird things. This one was expected to be, by this point on Sunday evening, more like near the northern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula. So that does two things. Number one, what it does is it ends up placing this storm a lot farther east and south than what was expected. The other thing is it doesn't get as much land interaction. Notice it's actually pretty far away from both the Yucatan Peninsula and Cuba. So it's sitting out here in a very good area of high ocean heat content in pretty much a perfect spot to essentially just grow. Now, luckily, it hasn't grown much. It's actually still a pretty weak tropical storm, and I'll show you why here in just a bit. But my point to that is this just goes to show how difficult tropical storm forecasting can be. So you'll notice now the forecast calls for not only a farther east movement. In other words, it was more like out here. Now you can see it's in here. But it also is obviously showing that stronger resolution, that stronger solution, that category 2 before making landfall. And I could even maybe see this getting to a category 3. It probably won't have time to do that, but that's a possibility. It just really depends on how this all comes together. But as of right now, yeah, it does look more like a farther east hit and a little bit stronger than what it was looking like yesterday. So let's look at the latest satellite and kind of get an idea of what's going on right now. And let me move this down just a tad. There we go. So now we can get a good idea of where this is. There's a lot going on this map, actually. One of the things I love doing as a meteorologist is just to read satellites. What I mean by that is, let me draw where the center is. It's actually way down in here, okay? So again, it was supposed to be here by now, and it actually went south and east the past 24 hours. Very interesting. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's a pretty strong high pressure ridge up in here. There's an upper low right in here. And so you've got competing factors where I think the combination of high pressure ridge pushing down here and you've got Franklin's outflow actually over here. There's a whole lot going on. So I think what happens sometimes is these tiny little developing tropical storms, they like to go down into where we would call a better environment. So it basically just kept sagging south today. And that's what we've noticed. So all that being said, remember how I talked about how, well, the good news is the inhibiting factor would be wind shear. And that's one of the reasons why we said, hey, it probably won't get too strong. Well, here's the problem. If it's 150 miles farther south than what was expected, so instead of being here, it's all the way down here, the problem is, by the time it gets up into this wind shear, guess what happens? The wind shear that is currently up in here, it goes away. It actually departs a whole day in advance. So instead of being up here on Monday, guess where it's going to be? It's going to be all the way down here for the next 24 hours. So it misses the wind shear. So if you're wondering, now wait a second, how could it go from a weak tropical storm or a low-end Category 1 hurricane to all of a sudden it could be a Cat 2 or maybe even borderline Cat 3 by the time it reaches Florida? That's how. That's why. There's your explanation. The wind shear that was in place, and actually still is, proof in point, you see these clouds? You see how they're ripping off the tops of the storm? So here are the storms, thunderstorms out here in the Gulf, and look at the clouds just flying off of them off to the east. That's your wind shear. But, again, Idalia is nowhere near it. It's way down here. So it's basically going, nope, no problem at all. If it was here, it would be feeling, kind of getting a haircut, feeling the northern edge of that. But instead, it's not anywhere near that. And on top of that, it won't be until Tuesday now. So let's say it ends up somewhere right here in the Yucatan Channel tomorrow on Monday. Okay, still not near the wind shear. And then the wind shear departs off to the east, and then on Tuesday, it comes in right behind it. Guess what? It now has a perfect avenue of very little wind shear. Now, it still will get some from the southwest from a dipping trough that's going to come down like this on the backside and help to kick it northeastward. But I don't think that's actually going to inhibit it too much. Reconnaissance aircraft did go down there, and there's another one on the way that we'll go down and look at it again. Basically, between now and landfall, you're going to see constant hurricane reconnaissance aircraft. What's interesting is sometimes we can actually see them flying overhead of our homes here in Florida because a lot of them come out of Lakeland. So that can be interesting to watch them. Of course, they'll move the planes around, but in this case, a lot of times you'll see them fly overhead and head down there. In this case, when going down there today, what I want you to notice is all the strongest winds were down to the south. Again, the environment is better down there. These winds on the northern half were very, very weak. So it is a lopsided storm. It is a weak storm. It is not an impressive storm right now, but we didn't expect it to be. Here's the problem. It can become an impressive storm because, again, even though it's in a really good environment, this is some of the warmest water in the entire world down here in the Western Caribbean, always is. What we call the loop current. So the Gulf Stream, this is water temperatures. The Gulf Stream runs up like this, and then it runs right there, okay? What we call the loop current runs up through the Gulf of Mexico and a lot of times loops around like that and then back down into the Gulf Stream. Well, there it is running right through the eastern Gulf. So as this storm slowly starts to drift north, it's going to be over really warm water. Then Tuesday morning, still really warm water, and it doesn't really get away from that until late Tuesday. Well, by that point in time, it's already used its fuel to get stronger. So therefore, this should not be a surprise. That's why the forecast has been bumped up. Now, it still doesn't look like a perfect storm like the Charlies, Katrinas, Irmas, Ians of the past. But that being said, it is definitely more significant than what it was just 24 hours ago. And that's one of the reasons why tropical storm forecasting can be so complicated. And you have to just kind of go this steady state and look at ensemble and consensus data. So for example, there still are a lot of models that keep it right there in that same range, upper tropical storm to lower category 1. But the problem is now there's a lot more taking it all the way up here, Cat 2. So when you see that, you can't ignore it. And that's one of the reasons why NHC basically said, okay, we can't keep ignoring this, and we have to go with the possibility. Now, there is a possibility it doesn't reach that. But I agree with them, and I agree with this idea that, yes, it is likely going to get stronger because I think it's going to kind of overdo what was originally expected. In other words, I think it's going to take advantage of that wind shear departing in the warm waters, and I do think that it will intensify. Therefore, all the numbers on the storm surge are coming up. This is your 3 to 5, Tampa Bay southward, and really it's 2 to 4 in this Longboat Key southward, but it's 3 to 5 generally speaking around Tampa Bay. Then you'll notice 5 to 8. That would be like Pasco, Hernando County. And then it's 7 to 11 near where the center likely will come in like that. Now keep in mind that if the center decides to keep going farther east and it does more like that, then you might see this 5 to 8 creep down here into Tampa Bay. So remember, it's always a moving target and it's always a constantly evolving situation. But as of right now, yes, it is a more significant situation where wherever that eye and wherever closer to that center of circulation comes ashore, you could be looking at a pretty significant storm surge. Now, again, it's not like an Ian like last year. It's not that big. It's not that robust. But that being said, to put this into perspective, because I know I have a lot of local viewers in Florida wondering, okay, well, give me an idea. All right, for all you locals that went through Hurricane Hermine in 2016, here's one I can give to you. If the storm does like this, which we're predicting right now, and actually it might even come a little closer like this, then in this what we call the bend of Florida, you can expect that 7 to 11 feet. and that would be about 3 feet higher than Hermine. Okay, so that kind of gives you perspective. Because let's face it, as humans, we always want to compare. Okay, if I went through Hugo in '89, what will it be compared to that? If I went through Wilma, if I went through Charlie, what will it be? And here's the other thing too: every storm's different. Charlie didn't have much of a storm surge because it was like just a ferocious tornado. It was very tiny, but inside its core, it had really strong winds. Then you had Irmas and Ians that had really, really larger scale winds and therefore a larger width and girth of storm surge. Well, this one's kind of not either one of those. The winds are definitely going to perk up. It's not nearly as big of an Ian and Irma, but on the flip side, it does look stronger than something like a Hermine. So I would say yes, if you are on the west coast of Florida, you do need to pay attention. But let's face it, living in Florida, you always have to pay attention. I mean, that's why we always say, always be prepared, no matter what. Rainfall, this could actually be good news. It's been a relatively drier season, shockingly, for the west coast of Florida. Typically, we get a lot of rain in the summer, but we haven't gotten a lot. So this could actually be one of the few positives that comes from this tropical system, is that we could end up with, 3, 6, somewhere in that 3 to 6 inch range of rainfall. And I think the ground could easily handle that. The only slight negatives are in those low elevation spots right near the beaches. Let's face it, the runoff can't handle it if the storm surge is high. So you can lead to freshwater flooding coming into storm surge, saltwater flooding. So just to give you a general idea, and again, I'm a big consensus and ensemble forecasting guy, so I don't like to concentrate on exact winds and just one particular model, but I will like to give you the idea of how everything's been trending. This is, this is the European trend model swath. So this kind of gives you an idea. If I draw the line of approximately where it expects its strongest winds, that gives you a general idea of where its strongest winds will be. And that is a little bit farther east and a little bit stronger than what we were expecting just yesterday, where those strongest of winds could be Cat 1 or Cat 2 bumping right up against the west coast of Florida. Let me go over and flip this actually over to GFS. Let's see if it's updated. Yes, it has. Okay, so now we're actually looking at 18Z data. So that's even newer data that has come in. And kind of the same thing. Now it's a little farther west, but same thing. It has trended a little bit farther east. And on top of that, these winds are coming in stronger. For perspective, they're coming in this more like 90 to 110 range, whereas yesterday they were more like the 70 to 95 range. So basically everything's bumped up one category. Okay, that puts into perspective. Yesterday we were talking about upper tropical storm, lower Cat 1. Now we're talking about, I'd say, Cat 1 to Cat 2. That's what we're looking at. And again, there is a possibility that it could continue to strengthen if it keeps slowing down like it is, and it has more time over these really warm waters right in here. That's the other thing that I really don't like that I'm seeing, is that it just keeps slowing down. And the longer it has, then the more chance it has of getting stronger and coming up north and affecting the west coast of Florida. So for now, again, the latest track is, there you go. It still looks like it's somewhere between Tampa Bay and the Big Bend of Florida, okay? And I would say the trends, based on just the past couple of hours, what I'm seeing is, yes, it does look a little bit farther east and southeast and slower. And again, that's not a good sign, because that means it's going to allow it more time to grow. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this could even maybe make a run at Cat 3. The only reason why I don't think it will at this point in time, now this could change tomorrow, but with the data I have right now, the reason why I think it's a Cat 2 is because once it does start moving north on Tuesday, it's not going to move slow. It's going to move fast. Case in point, right now, let's look at where it is. You see it right all the way down here. Again, it's gone way south. So it's not going to move much at all in the next 24 hours. I mean, look at this. It's basically going to still hug near Cuba. So this land interaction will help interact with it and keep it from getting too strong. And its slow upwelling might help a tiny bit too. But once it gets moving, it's going to go into a great environment. but it's going to move fast. I mean, look at this. In 24 hours, it goes from all the way down here near Cuba to landfall. So again, it's kind of a 180. It goes really, really slow and nearly stationary, and then it just takes off. So that might actually help us, because usually storms that are moving that fast don't always have a lot of time to take advantage of their full environmental surroundings. So we'll see how that plays out. Again, this is a Sunday evening update. Basically, anybody that ever lives in Florida should always be prepared for these storms. So if you live along the coast, be prepared for the possibility that you might have to move, a few miles inland for a day just to get away from that storm surge. Even though this is not as big as some of the big storms we've seen in the past, you might be asked to just, move away if you're right by the beach, if you're right on that low elevation, and go inland and then come back the next day, something like that. All right, so it's Sunday night. I'll plan to give another update for tomorrow on Monday. Thanks for joining in. I'm meteorologist Brian McClure.